So Rohit, we're going to get started. Thank you so much, Rohit, for joining us on Thrive Talks. As always, it's wonderful getting to speak to you. And like I said, it's a great way for me to catch up with you, which we haven't been able to do in a while. To all our participants, thank you so much for joining us for Thrive Talk. It's an initiative we have started at Harappa Education, a fortnightly dialogue series with India's leading talent custodians, essentially because nothing is changing as much as all of us having to cultivate, preserve, and motivate our talent in a time like this. And with the second wave surging, I think we all have tough times ahead of us as talent leaders, talent custodians, and as professionals and business builders, of course. And we just wanted to create a forum on which we can bring people together and have some interesting conversation. It's a great privilege and source of joy to have Rohit Kapoor join us for our second Thrive Talk. Rohit is, of course, a dear friend, been a great ambassador and support for Harappa, but most of you certainly know him as the CEO of OYO for India and Southeast Asia, and in a mandate with which he also obviously leads thousands and thousands of people. And one, all of us can only imagine and anticipate the times of challenge and change and crisis that someone like him, given the industry that he's worked in, has gone through over the last 14 or 15 months, and even tougher to do that when you're put in a complete spotlight of scrutiny as unicorns often are. So Rohit, let's get started and welcome again.
Thank you, Shazi. Thank you. Pleasure to be here, as always.
Okay, so Rohit, I mean, I don't think it needs to be said, why the topic of the conversation today is talent dilemmas in the times of crisis and change, right? Because I think we've all dealt with dilemmas as CEOs, as founders, as business builders. I wanted to unpack that a little bit, to say that on this topic of around adapting to change and break it down to different kinds of professionals at different stages of their career, right? And how do you think about talent and the dilemmas of talent as an early career professional, a mid-career professional, and then sort of your next in line, which are senior leaders, and what has been most challenging for these three distinct sets of audiences? And let's begin with that.
Yeah. So thank you, Shazi. Thank you. In my mind, last 15, 20 months, whatever, has been truly a world without a handbook, right? We are so used to like there's 5 things which you can do to fix this, 5 things you can do to do that. But I think for the first time in a long time, most people who are honest to themselves said, we really don't know exactly how this is shaping, what's going to happen. So if I look at the different cohorts you mentioned, that is the early career professionals. To me, I think this has been the biggest sort of disruption in that cohort, right? More than anybody else, for 2 or 3 reasons. One is, especially people who are from good institutes, have done well academically, or have been born in India where opportunities have been far more than ever before, right? So things like job losses, things like pay cuts, things like you're being asked to be on furlough, right? For example, are completely alien concepts. In the Western world, some of this is more acceptable, even socially. And if you're on a furlough or a job cut, beyond your economic loss, you always worry about what will I say at home, right? मैं मम्मी पापा को क्या बताऊंगा, right? So, and I think that helping, look, and also at the end of the day, frankly, whenever somebody asks me that what will happen to them, I said, look, what is happening is terrible. But I do know these are such good people. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking like so many, thousands and thousands of people who have faced this, right? And will probably lakhs. They're so talented that it's a matter of 3 to 6 months they'll land back in the right place.
Absolutely.
It's similar to what happened, let's say, in 2009 in campuses or 2002 in campuses, right? Where suddenly there was an Armageddon and you didn't know what hit you. But just helping them just simply understand that, look, you have a 40-year career ahead of you. A 3-month disruption in your career means nothing. And frankly, what I used to say is that, look, if somebody gave you a 3-month break from work, what did you want to do that you never did earlier? And some got a bit upset saying you are trivializing. I said, I'm not. I'm actually trying to tell you that tell me what you want to do. And somebody said, like, look, I always wanted to learn programming. I wanted to learn digital marketing. I wanted to just be at home a lot more and learn being a chef. I said, just go and do it, because it's not like it's not possible. And some of them did. Some of them had economic challenges. It's not easy on everyone. So for them, I think just dealing with this sudden disruption and helping them just see a very simple point, saying, this is a very small part of your career that you are stuck in. It'll open up, it'll get better. And most of it did. I think even if you look at the situation last June versus now, I think it's 70% better. Like, it's not 100% better. In terms of more middle management and senior management, two things which are quite the need of the hour. One was they really did not know exactly what to do. Right? And hence the level of problem solving required with each person almost on a daily basis became far more important. Like, even if you've done a 10-year career in FMCG, in, let's say, digital marketing or traffic, you come and you're in this situation and none of the old playbook applies because you don't, price elasticity not working, right? Different data patterns not working because simply the world is thinking very differently. Just give you an example. Last May, June, July, August, we saw dropping prices made no sense because people who were out there were out there. People who were not out there were not out there. Right? Nobody was choosing a hotel because it was 200 rupees lower or 300 rupees higher. It was the self-selection was to, am I the kind who will travel out or not? And then when I do it, then there are a set of choices which come into play. So old paradigms broke up, and for them to help them problem solve and say, look, let's go back to basics. And what did we do? So I said, when in doubt, do 2 or 3 simple things. One, just increase massive amounts of frequency of communication with frontline. Frontline because you learn, with customers because they'll tell you what they're thinking, right? And that will change. So you can't believe in that for next 6 months. And third is just do it, right? Do learn, iterate. That model, because nobody had the perfect answer. So you can't theorize beyond a point. And for the senior management, it was really around communication, but that's easier said than done, because communication in good times and when things are going great everybody wants to do it, right? Because they're happy news to share, there are happy stories to share, there is promotions to be rewarded, there's bonuses to be given, there's stocks to be granted. Everybody loves that, right? Everybody wants to be the one doing it. But in tough times, I think it is not that people were shy from doing it, but they either were not able to judge that what kind of communication works. So somebody has got COVID in the family. You call them and what exactly do you say? Right? Do you say, don't worry, everything is fine, and that sounds trivial, right? Or do you say, so there were so many dilemmas on communication. So helping, again, people say that, please, this does not mean that you need not be out there. You just need to be out there all the time. Just to give you an example, as an organization, I was across levels, right? Globally, we would have done 500 plus town halls in the last 1 year. And that, when I say town hall, it doesn't mean all hands, right? It could mean a 5% gathering, a 10% gathering, a 20% gathering, different cohorts, external with partners, conversations with customers. But we just kept it on. We just kept it on initially as a forceful mechanism, like almost a forced mechanism. Saying, I want to see like 20 town halls happen this week. And I'll track it, right? Because when people did it, they said, oh no, it's fine. I think people also get it. People are not expecting some superhuman advice. They just want to connect. And even we continue that today. Ritesh, for example, does a global weekly all hands every week, right? So those are some of the things I saw, which were distinct from what are usual challenges in managing talent and helping talent grow.
In times of crisis and change. I want to double, and I love that framework that you created. That early talent was it with the early talent and the young talent and the young, bright, high potential sort of professionals? I wanted to ask: is it a question of managing that anxiety because they're starting their careers and there's this big air pocket and roadblock that gets it, or also it's also to be provocative, it is also to manage their entitlement because they only expected because of conversations around pay cuts. And I completely disagree, by the way, of the understanding, at least maybe of people have, or Western research has, of Western millennials, that they don't care about money. I feel especially young professionals from India's pedigreed institutions want money, plus want purpose, plus want work-life balance, plus want meaning, plus want great work, right? So this conversation around pay cuts and thing, do you think it was both about helping them manage their own anxiety as well as sort of giving them the hard, cold reality of what the macroeconomic climate is, and that, listen, brace up. There is this, you are going to confront salary cuts, furloughs, and things like that. Do you think it was both of them for the young talent?
So, Shreya, I'll say usually we do end up managing the sense of entitlement sometimes in certain points. That's true. But in the last 1 year, I will say that was not the case.
Okay.
Because the world was setting expectations so rapidly and so badly, right, to each one of us in terms of what to expect in terms of being a normal life, right? So in the last 1 year, we are so happy if we can go out and eat at a restaurant. Like, we haven't seen a movie in 15 months probably in a theater, right?
Yes.
So just normal things became so special, right, that the sense of entitlement has corrected by itself. I think, in fact, one thing which is the pandemic has done to all of us, including myself, is to help us realize that we actually need so little, right, to be happy. And yet we want so much to be in the belief that that's all those things make us happy. So I think the environment self-corrected that phenomenon by itself. And
Understood.
so there's no need to hammer away at that again and again. I did not see that too much. I genuinely think there was anxiety, right? And anxiety in India is slightly also born out of the social context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where being out of a job is just such a huge stigma, right? It is being on a break. Like, how many kids actually take let's say a gap year in India? Like, if you've taken a gap year, people feel that you must not be doing well in your studies or something wrong with you, right? So those paradigms still exist in our culture, and hence I think dealing with anxiety is a piece.
And actually, that creates, even till we're much older, like even with people like us, that our parents would want to know a performance appraisal and what salary hikes that you get and things like that is just so commonplace in our families, right?
So I think family secret. I never ever shared my compensation increase with my dad, not because I don't want him to know about it, but he will actually go and talk about it in his friends and all, right? Like, so he just enjoyed doing it. So I was very, very scared about that. But yeah, so those things are very, very unusual.
So to bring you back to the mid-career talent that you're talking about, and really we all know that it's the middle managers of a company that really run companies, right? That's the front line of execution for any business in that sense, right? And this, your do, learn, iterate model and this really enhanced sense of problem solving, right? Did that, how difficult was it? And what did you do specifically at Oyo, for example, beyond this, like go make mistakes, do, learn, iterate, take nothing for granted? And how well do you think you've been able to do that? How confident is that cadre of professionals feeling now 13, 14 months? And given your industry, which has just gone through so much.
Yeah. So, Shreya, I think we were lucky in a sense that we've always hired for that talent by design. So for us, for hiring more than background, more than functional knowledge, I think we value first person problem solving, desire to learn, communication, people, these kind of skills on a very explicit level much more, right? So we are lucky to have a team where this comes fairly naturally, right? But I think within that natural element as well, there was a need to sort of almost tell people saying, look, we are in it together. I don't have a better answer, right? But you know what? I'm going to work with you next 1 week, right? Get our hands dirty, and we're going to solve it. So I'll give you an example. Say something we launched purely out of insight on the ground. When the COVID was raging last year, we of course went and did all the sanitization protocols, everything that we put on the field, and we called it sanitized state tag. And then as we kept talking to customers, we realized that some of them actually wanted to see it in front of their eyes happen, right? Because the fear was much higher in those days. So we got Sonu Sood, right, as a brand ambassador, and we launched a campaign called Sanitize Before Your Eyes, where you pay a small fee of 50 rupees. And when you go to the hotel, at least the most visible components of the hotel, like the switches, the remote, etc., will be clean in front of your eyes. Right? Now, that came out of a mid-management guy's constant observation on the ground. He went to 5 hotels, spoke to them, saying, "What is the customer saying? Tell me." So he said, I'm picking this up that this can be a. Now, this is a bizarre idea in a way, that who in a hotel
wants to see housekeeping in front of your eyes. We're so used to it happening after we leave hotel rooms, right? Like, don't do it in front of my eyes.
Exactly. So it is such a counterintuitive thought in normal times. But just imagine, now it makes so much sense that if you go to a hotel today and you see a guy cleaning and wiping using PPE suit, you'll feel more comfortable about that. And a year or 2 years back, we were saying this hotel is not well organized because these guys are cleaning in front of me. That means
they're not ready for my room before I've come, right?
So I think there's so many things of that nature which were counterintuitive, which it made sense at a very simple level, but very hard to either accept as an organization or implement. Those things really help. We did like weddings online, right? As in part online, part digital, where
as part of your weddings business.
That's right. So so many people could not travel in, NRIs, friends, family. So we in wedding banquets, while the core family was there in person, we organized these booths where live streaming was happening, and people could actually even give their wishes and transfer cash and all kinds of things that they could do. Right? So those came from insights on a continuous basis and experimentation. Some didn't work, but that was.
That's so interesting. I can't imagine like a payment gateway, like your product and platform team getting involved in weddings so that you can have payment gateways and OTP authentication to come into bless. It's, all of that is really interesting. And I guess I'm guessing that talking about these initiatives and, the problem solving that people were applying on the ground, possibly did it embolden and empower the middle line to do much more?
Sorry, Shazi, your voice broke a little bit. What was the question?
I'm saying by talking about these initiatives at the company level, like how did you ensure that these kinds of initiatives were celebrated enough so that everybody felt empowered to do this learn, do, iterate model?
Yeah, I think so. As I said, I think this is something we just over invested in during the last year, where and recognition for different kinds of people happens in very different ways. So, for example, for mid to senior management, if it in a management meeting, this gets mentioned as one of the key initiatives, was bought by this lady, and she did fantastically well on this. That's almost good enough. And sometimes for frontline, I think we just did so many digital R&R. And one of the fun things we did, which really worked well, was in all our R&Rs, we realized that for just imagine if you do R&R in a physical world and wanted to invite families, that would be a crazy affair to manage. Right? But we realized everybody is with their family today, at home, working. So we got all families into R&Rs. So we'll have families, the person is receiving the award, and the father is
there.
Or wife or spouse or husband is there, kids are there. I don't think our people have been so happy to receive R&R ever before, because उनकी घर पे जो इज्जत बढ़ जाती है ना.
Of course.
उसका बहुत impact है life में.
No, absolutely. No, that's really using an opportunity or a work from home to an advantage. And you were telling me about doing magic shows, for example, or music concerts. Some companies I've heard have done for employees and their family, which is actually one performance that can be streamed to everyone. So I think in terms of those things, it is actually enabled. You mentioned, and this is kind of segueing into the communication sort of bundle, which is our second theme, and I'll come to that and then stop for questions from the audience and break this session into two. We all say that obviously frequency of, if nothing more has been sort of brought to the fore than this constant communication of a variety of updates, variety of business strategy change, variety of team changes, hiring changes, furlough changes that we've all had to do through this year, right? Of course, it's like you said, it's much easier said than done. This is a really, really tough one. How do you think the style of communication changed? And tell me a little bit about how do you think your style of communication has changed? Because everyone talks about authenticity and vulnerability, but is that really so easy to do? And if you don't have it, and you're someone I know who has it already, but if you don't have it, how do you learn this, right? And how have you coach some leaders and managers who were very uncomfortable with getting into that almost touchy-feely zone?
Yeah. No, look, I think I firmly believe that organizations have become far more democratic than they were there ever before, right? So you do a Zoom all hands, you are not authentic or you're not well-meaning, people don't show up, right? And you'll get a vote in terms of how many people actually showed up when you wanted to speak to them, and that's a very damning sign, right? So I think people do realize that they need to learn. I think that doesn't still give the skill, but that emphasizes that you need to be good at it. And I think, Shreyasi, on this one, unfortunately, there's no other way than role model, right? Because doing it consistently on a day-to-day basis, and people see you being vulnerable. Like, for example, simple things. And I'm not using a technique, but just to make people comfortable. On Zoom calls, very often kids come, right? Or pets come, or there's a noise. I will make sure that I tell the person where it's happening that don't worry, it's okay. Right? And then I'll call my daughter or my cat or somebody and just put the cat on the lap. And I've actually done calls with the cat sitting next to me, right? Because this is reality. This is what people are facing at home. We were not in a perfect world, and people were kind of struggling with how do I manage home versus office and work from home, and when they see somebody more senior doing it in front of their eyes, they know it's fine, right? It just puts telling people we are not judging you. We are not judging you because frankly, everybody's in trying to manage their own lives. You don't know what's going on in their lives at this point in time. So putting people at ease with what is happening around them. So today, nobody in my team even worries if a kid is screaming, shouting, crying. They will happily tell me that give me 10 minutes time, I'll sort this out and then come back. Right? So they don't need to think twice. I think we need to get to a cultural point like that. And I'm sure it's happened in many organizations, but it does take effort to tell people it's okay, right? That's authenticity in the sense that, look, I think people are too smart. People catch bullshit too fast nowadays, right?
Yeah.
You can't, sometimes you can believe that I can bullshit my way through things, but that's not true. People may just respectfully not say anything in your face, but they will turn back and say, oh, yeah, I know what reality is going on, right? So being just honest with them, treating them as intelligent human beings, as intelligent as you are, or probably more, is the only way to deal with situation. And that, by the way, has nothing to do with the pandemic or otherwise. That's the only way to do it.
That's it. And this authenticity is also not just about bearing your emotions, there, and about vulnerability. Because I think leaders, I think what's challenging,
respecting other person's IQ and EQ.
Yeah.
It's not about your authenticity.
Yeah.
So much. Because frankly, my authenticity can be different than yours, right? Yeah. But it is just giving enough respect to the other person, saying nobody is a fool on the other side, right? They are mature people, they're adults. They have an EQ and an IQ which is as good as mine, if not more, right? And if I communicate from that lens, then it's fine.
I have two follow-up questions on that, Rohit, from a leadership perspective, right? Is, you know, and tell me your personal style. Do you find it easier to deliver good news, or you're a bad news? You're really good a communicator when it comes to bad news, because we've all had to deliver bad news as well this year. And does that style change when it's about delivering bad news? Is sort of the follow-up question.
Yeah. So I always tell my teams that, look, and this is not my statement, I read it somewhere and it just sounds good. I just tell them that good news can take the stairs, bad news must take the elevator, right? When it comes to dealing with me. So, and I do the same with Ritesh, right? If there's something great going on, Ritesh may not get a call from me sometimes. But if there's some crisis or something, he'll be the first one to, if I know it, he'll know it within 5 minutes, right? And I think there's a very important cultural element to bad news. Why do people worry about sharing bad news? Right? Is a question to ask. And it's a very simple thing. Either they fear getting judged or blamed. The moment you say it is, even if it is your fault, it is not the conversation at that point in time. We'll first deal with the situation. And you'll have the full force of the leadership and organization behind in dealing with it. The root cause RCA will do later. Because many people, what they do is they immediately start doing an RCA. Why did it happen? How could we have done better? Arey Baba, we'll first sort it out now. There'll be enough time and more to later on to problems, and we should all get better at things. So we must learn and grow, right? I think that when people have that comfort of saying, I can come to you with bad news and you will actually partner with me in helping me go from that to a better place, is when it starts flowing.
No, that's true. What I also meant is bad news that the organization has to give the employees, which is beyond the control of the employees, which is much more macro driven or business strategy driven, closing one arm of the business, closing one geography, closing one location, taking away 500 hotels or merchants. I'm sure you've had to make these decisions, right, this year?
Yeah. So I think that one, I will say, more than the news, the context matters. Are you providing enough context or not? And then are you, after the bad news, not just simply delivering the bad news. What are you doing after the bad news? I'll give you a real example. When we had to do some layoffs, right, last year, we apart from the notice periods, compensations that happened, but there was an outplacement agency for 100% of the people, right? And it was done for like 6 months, not for like a month. We said next 2 years, if we hire again, we will give you the point of first refusal. As in, not refusal, we'll send you the JDs, right? Continued medical insurance coverage for 6 months to a year for yourself and family, right? So minimize the impact. I think nobody can prevent bad news from happening ever. I think none of us are we're all humans at the end of the day. But have we thought about it in terms of cushioning enough, right? Is one, the human aspect to it. Providing context is the obligation part of it, saying why is this happening, what are the choices we first made before we got to this situation, right? I think all those things are fine, and even today, at least I'll tell you, in the month there are 5 to 10 ex-employees or entrepreneurs who reach out to me because they want a reference, they're going to college, they want a, and I drop my work and do it first, right? Because I think that sense of obligation continues to help to the extent we can always. So again, it is it easy to do? Absolutely not, right? Is it must do? Absolutely yes. So that's how we think about it. So not a single people conversation throughout the last year happened over email or on phone, as in email or in a cold way. It was all one-to-one.
Understood. I love what you said about good news must take the stairs and bad news must take the elevator. I'll ever forget that. I'm going to put that somewhere. And also this thing about minimize the impact when it comes to the impact of the bad news and give the context as an obligation to the employees, and maybe much more about explanation of the thinking and why we chose this option out of others. Rohit, we already have a bunch of questions. I'm going to take them before I move to our next theme, which is around much more around productivity. And as we meld the personal and the professional, but we already have a bunch of questions. And one of the questions that's coming up is how to nurture talent during the times of uncertainty. And we've spoken a little bit about that, especially you spoke a lot about the mid-career talent, but anything else you'd like to add that? How do you nurture talent during times of uncertainty?
Shersi, I think I'll answer the question in a slightly different way. What is the definition of talent? Right? I think to me, the definition is very simple. I find somebody who's extremely talented when they can do both things in the same career. If you give them an opportunity, they will hit it out of the park. And if you give them a crisis to handle, they're the safest place to handle crisis. That's talent. Right? But there are many who kind of will do very well in opportunities and growth phase, but completely when it comes to crisis. There are many who will handle a crisis very well, but no idea about how to grow. People who can do both are my definition of talent.
So not every employee is talent. Let's also become much better identifying really which talent to nurture. Is that the point that you're making?
Yeah, I think so. Not everybody is at the same level of talent, and by talent I don't mean it's God gifted. It's people who have developed this muscle over a period of time by sheer determination, practice, hard work, and wanting to be out there. There are so many people in the team who when they see a challenging situation, there are few who will come and say, "Give me this, I'll make this happen." And you are somebody. It's like Tendulkar taking the ball in the last over, right? When he was not even a regular bowler, saying, "I will bowl this last over for you." The fact that we won the match was incidental. The fact that Tendulkar took the ball and did it is legendary.
True. So look for talent in those kind of situations. No, absolutely, that makes sense. We have a question from T Win, right? And I think the question is, how can we tackle dilemma situations, especially crisis around the world? And I think the point that they're trying to make with this question is around the uncontrollable, which is really so much of our crisis is born by an uncontrollable, right? How do you manage and handle people at a time like this? And you and I were having this conversation yesterday or day before around energy, right? Especially with the second wave surging, it has been so depressing. Like I generally, so optimistic by default, I think as all entrepreneurs are, but they does get you down, right? So and this lapse, the time that we have been in this period, we're still not out of it, and I doubt that over the next 7-8 months it's unlikely to get too different. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so for things I can change and influence, I have coffee. For things I can't, I have wine.
I think that's a great framework and tip.
I think it's very, very important. So I'll tell you, this is my favorite question because, and I'll quote verbatim. When the pandemic hit last year, I remember having a meeting in April with a senior team. And I will say this in vernacular because it sounds the best there. And if there's a problem with translation, I'll do it.
I think there's some people who are from outside of India, but you should translate.
I will translate it, right? So I said, बस मेरे को एक कमिटमेंट चाहिए सबसे, राइट? कि जो चीज हम इन्फ्लुएंस नहीं कर सकते उसके बारे में हम हाय हाय नहीं करेंगे। और अगर हाय हाय आपको करनी है, वेंट करना है, तो आई विल कम आउट एंड हैव अ बियर विद यू इन द इवनिंग समवेयर और ऑन अ लाइक ऑन Zoom कॉल। आपको जितना वेंट करना है करो, डू व्हाट यू वांट, बट इन द रूम व्हेन वी आर प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग we'll only discuss what we can impact. Because while 10 things I can't do anything about, like for example, COVID is raging in the world, I can't do anything. Vaccination speed in India, I can contribute a little bit, but not much, right? It's so many macro factors there. But can I serve my customer problem better? I certainly can, right? Can I? So there's so many things you can do, right? That we get lost in this high, and that just defocuses the entire organization. You say, "Oh my God, the world is breaking down." Of course it is, but still there are 50 things which we can do. Have we done all of them perfectly? No. So to translate, I'm just simply saying there's just being able to parse out things that you can influence and getting the entire team focused on that, by your own focus on that, versus discussing, what I call world hunger in a way, which you can, I'll rather, in my mind, take the opportunity of going out and feeding the 50 people around my house than ranting on social media saying, the world is an unfair place, right?
Yeah.
So that's the formula for us.
No, I love that formula about what I can control. Coffee helps me solve, and what I can't wind up. But I think you're right to say pilot the action that you can rather than stressing about what you can't. And I think it is a mindset thing that constantly has to be talked about. There's an interesting question from Aris that's come up, which is, how do you handle people when they need to change, right? Because all of us have had to change in the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we communicate. Not everybody will rise up as quickly as the occasion demands or you might expect out of them, right? What are have you struggled with some people who you think that pace of change has been slow, and how do you help them change?
Yeah, absolutely. I have struggled, and I'm sure some people have struggled with me as well. In terms of their expectations from me, how I should change. I may not have done it. But I have one observation which is slightly controversial here. I have seen, and this is my own observation, this is not even empirical, right? Is I've seen up to a certain age, right? People are fairly receptive to feedback. The problem is the quality of delivery of feedback is extremely poor.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
It is either too personal, saying you did this, you did that, versus describing the impact it has in an organization and how the same person could imagine a better world and a better outcome, right? And what it will take. So the quality of feedback, if it improves, people will change on their own. But I also think that beyond a certain age, it becomes harder. People are more formed. And there I've seen people change a lot more out of unfortunate personal circumstances or tragedies, which shake them up and ask them to think about life fresh, or it is to do with some big career change or career move or career jolt or success. So it does vary a little bit. There's no cutoff, but the more formed you are and baked you are, the less easy it is to influence through feedback and change. But for a vast majority, it is the poor quality of feedback which causes lack of change than their own ability to do so.
I completely agree with you. People, we all sort of, eulogize the power of feedback as a gift that keeps giving. But I'm like, really, we must train the people who give people feedback, both on their work and their strengths as well as their development areas, because most people don't. They're unstructured. Some very well-meaning people I've seen more and more go into what I call this from this book called Ruinous Empathy, that they almost sometimes people need to be pushed, sometimes they need to be cajoled. I think this whole quality of feedback, so to the person asking the question around how do you handle people who need to change, I please make sure and think about the quality of input and stimulus you're giving them and what you need for them to change on, what that change looks like, what impact will that change have, and then help them connect to what the tools that might possibly help them change. And I think there's a lot that we have to do if we expect change. The questions keep coming. I'm going to just take them all, Rohit, before we move. And I guess we just move to the last bit of the question. A couple of are around, and I'm going to some from Yuvarani Janki Raman, and there's another question around the hybrid workplace and the hybrid environment, right? Yuvarani is asking, what will the company of the future look like, and how do you prepare employees for the future? And then, of course, given the time that we're in right now, What have you found different about engaging employees in a hybrid environment? And you spoke about the R&R, which can get families involved. So that could be one thing. But at a work level, from a cultural perspective in the company, what happens differently in hybrid?
Yeah, I'll tell you at least there are two separate questions here. So let me take the hybrid one first. We've done things as the environment has allowed us to do things. So I'll give you different examples. So when there was complete work from home last year, we had a full family day entire week where every employee in the family and they've got engaged in like host of activities, tombola, magic shows, kids events, all kinds of things, right? Then we have a fitness program. So there's a twice a week yoga session which happens 8 to 9 in the morning, which any employee can join, right? Yesterday there was a health challenge where different teams were made across India and Southeast Asia on fitness champions, and there was a yoga instructor and a fitness instructor who was doing it online. When the world opened up a little bit in between, I personally used to go for cricket matches in Gurgaon, where we had good, social distancing norms, and we played cricket quite a few weekends. We have some of us love golf, so we have a golfing group where we meet. So in office, we had this roster where people were coming in different cohorts. Right? So the way I'll say is that from an engagement standpoint, at a group level, there were every opportunity we got, we took.
To get people to meet in some manner.
Yeah. For me personally, it has been the maximum number of 1:1 conversations I have ever done. Because that's important for leaders. So that's been on the hybrid base. Company of the future look like. Well, this is one of those questions where the risk of going wrong is so heavy that somebody will quote me later saying you have no foresight, vision, whatever. You do it all wrong. So, but let's take I think the one thing which will be the English and maths of the future is technology and product. Right. So for us in India, growing up, English and maths were path to prosperity. Right. So our parents used to say that in these two subjects you must do well. Rest is fine. If you do well, great. If you don't, also fine. Right. I think understanding of technology and product and how they impact organizations is not going to be a tech and product function job. That's going to be the way of life for everyone. 4 to 5 years time.
And it's a tech product mindset for everyone to develop.
Yeah, and what will manifest as a result, and whether you're an HR professional, you're a legal professional, anybody, I'm talking of everyone. What will manifest in is disproportionate divergence in wages. So people who have that, in my mind, in 5 years' time, will command anywhere from 50 to 100% premium. Right? Or people who don't. That's my only sort of crystal ball gazing for the future.
No, you're right that I think everybody having the technology and product mindset from a workplace of the future, of company of the future, is where everyone is a digital product and technology person, and not that we just have teams of digital and tech. And I say this to a lot of young people at Harappa, that I feel like I have made myself doubly and hopefully triply employable by working in a tech-enabled startup and founding a tech-enabled startup, because that's really the way of the future. So if you work at Harappa, you must engage with the technology and the product part of it, which is really, really important. I think people have talked about the hybrid and workplace of the future, and I'm now segueing back to the last theme of our conversation. We have only about 12 or 13 minutes left, Rohit. Is this thing around hybrid and productivity? Because the fact is, and I always said that 2020 in some ways was almost easier, the message was very clear: stay home and shut up, and whatever you can do, please do it. Now in 2021, we are all confronted with all of these: how many times who should come to work, how many times, who really needs to meet, which functions have really suffered because people have not met that often. Does everybody have the skills to be a largely remote, largely flexible worker in terms of motivation? Asynchronous working means that people must have great writing skills so that they document everything, so we are not all sitting in 12-hour Zoom calls, right? What happens how do you prepare an entire large organization like the one you run for this almost anti-fragile way of working, that you can work all days in office, you can work never seeing in office, or and is the ideal that you see each other sometimes but then work other times, whatever? What are you doing?
Yeah. So let me, before answering the more conceptual question, let me give you a few anecdotes on how I personally believe productivity has really gone up in the last year. Right? Let's take a simple example. Let's take a salesperson who's out in the field and is not performing. Okay. Now you want to coach the person. How do you do it? You'll typically ask somebody to join and say, go on the next sales call, observe, and come back. Right? Now imagine what started happening was people started doing sales calls on phone, like even field personnel, because they couldn't visit. So we plugged in our trainers into those calls. And I can tell you, for the entire sales people, we had customized program ready in 1 week's time.
Because you got real life situations that they were confronting, questions they couldn't answer, right?
Exactly. So this person is great at product knowledge, doesn't close. Right? This person just doesn't explain enough, or objection handling, because rather than give a very sort of wide variety of inputs, which people say, why are you telling me this? I already know this, right? Versus saying, by the way, we observe 5 calls of yours. This is your problem. You fix this, your productivity will go up. I think that creates a very different dimension and ability to impact productivity. That's one. Second is, I think just channels like Slack, for example, on some of these tools, you can automate dashboards today. So nobody needs to make dashboards, right? Of every simple variety. And just encouraging a wider variety of people to adopt that than believing that is a job of the IT department. Right? Third, I'll give you an example that we actually launched a data sciences academy last year. So one of the debates we were happening in July, August was saying we don't have enough data science talent in this country. So true to the principle of saying don't do high. I said that's great. So now we are not setting up data science universities immediately. At least this year we won't get any output from there, even if we do. So what do? So we launched a data science academy in Oyo. Shreyasi, we got 1,000 applications.
From within Oyo. Wow.
For 70 seats. Right? So we graduated 70 people in data science.
You're now in ed business also, is it?
In a way, yes, because I have 30 fantastic data science leaders. So they were telling me they don't get talent. I put it back on them, and they were fantastic to respond. I said, you guys pick the 70 best people we have, train them, right? We'll invest behind it. Train them. So we got 70 people. Those 70 people actually got moved from their job. Some of them are sales folks. They got moved from that job to a data science job. Right? And the mandate to them was, wherever you're going, you must use data and increase productivity by 2x or 1.5x. Right? So some of these have been the experiments that we have done in terms of productivity. Over time, I do believe that the world last year learned to do a lot more with less.
Absolutely.
Right? And that lesson will, I say, last a decade for sure, right? Because people who have led in these times are not going to go back to bad productivity outcomes.
Hopefully, that's the hope. We hope that this forecast of yours doesn't go wrong. But I think I like to think about this, almost this enthusiasm of tool nerds and tool junkies. If people want to use a new tool and believe it, it's great at Harappa, for example, people come, I said, okay, fine, use Airtable. You want to use Slack, use Trello, use Jira, use whatever you think. And then let's find a way, use it in your team, and then let's find a way to scale it if it's good. But this constant experimentation around productivity software and tools, I really think is something that leaders must encourage. You spoke about R&R and things. There was a very interesting experiment we did at Harappa that I think was one of our best employee engagement things we did last year, was this Pecha Kucha talks. Like I loved, and a quiz, something we call the Let's Get Quizzical, where people were discussing random trivia, and the energy that we would see was the energy that and you've come to the Harappa office, the energy we would see in the office of just the vibe. And the Pecha Kucha was this very simple thing that people talked about 5 recipes that they've learned during work from home, 5 movies that they've watched, 5 holidays that they wish they will go on right after it's done. And that kind of sharing became really, really important for people to do. But come to my larger point around, are our systems and are our companies and the way that we've trained people, are they truly anti-fragile, that you think that they can work in any model that we put to them, any form of hybrid at any point?
I think so. I think what, Shashi, here's the simple truth. Zoom wasn't invented in 2020.
Of course.
There was Teams or anything else. So why didn't it take off earlier? Why did work from home not take off earlier in a big way? It was lack of trust, right? It was lack of trust that if you are working from home means you're boondoggling, right? Or we don't have enough visible control over your life, right? I think all of us our hands were forced into accepting that as a massive global social experiment, and we realized it works. Because you know what? We did it. We were not allowing others to do it. Right? So I think that has made a big change in terms of mindset. So the biggest win for work from anywhere hybrid has been just this acceptance that you can trust people to be productive even if they're not in front of your eyes.
Of course.
Absolutely. I think that's a single line explanation I have to why this will stick.
Understood, because it was such an attitudinal trust thing that once you've seen the fruits of that trust, hopefully largely on balance, it has been positive, right? Even if there were some stressors.
Nobody today asks the question saying, "Tum ghar pe ho, kaam kar rahe ho na?" Right? Yeah, it was a very woman thing earlier, saying, "Oh, we must allow flexibility because a woman needs it," right? Now it's no longer a gender thing, no longer a specific person thing. It's an everyone thing. Right?
No, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think that's the biggest change.
We have only 5 minutes, and last 2 questions that I'm going to take up, and then we'll ask you to pose for a selfie on a live chat. I don't know how we'll do that, but we'll figure a way. The 2 questions that are for you that we'll end with are: what are the main talent priorities for you at OYO India Southeast this year? And the last question is: as you go up the corporate ladder, what do you think are the most important attributes to develop? And what have you very consciously developed it yourself? That you've had such an interesting career.
Yeah. Let me take the second one first. I think big believer in basic toolkit, right? So the basic professional toolkit should have problem solving, should have both written and verbal communication. If you're bilingual, trilingual, even better, because it's very, very powerful, right? So I did not want to restrict only to English. I think that's great. But if you have good grasp for English and Hindi and another language, that's fantastic, right? The third is really, I think the one thing which really helps is your own sense of security and the growing own sense of security, right? Because what it allows you to do as a result is to hire and work with great people, right? Without being threatened by them. And that to me is a singular explanation to success.
Manage your own insecurity as a professional so that you can work with people better than you.
Absolutely. Because if you're secure as a professional, you're not threatened by your boss, you're not threatened by colleagues, and you hire great people, right, under you. Because and that just has a as an exponential effect on success.
Absolutely. So just to recap, Rohit Kapoor's toolkit for professional success as you go up the corporate ladder to the person who asked this question is problem solving, written and verbal communication, and sense of personal security as a professional so that you can work with great people, right? And your talent priorities for OYO this year.
Talent priorities for OYO, 3 or 4 things. One is to keep the energy going. And I think I truly believe that one of the challenges one as a leader is once I wake up in the morning, my face cannot be showing any lack of energy, right? Because and it's not a burden I place on myself unreasonably. I think it's true of most leaders, and that's true of my regional head. That's true of everyone, right? And keeping the energy going these times, there's so much bad news floating around. There's so much negativity. There's is a number one priority, I'll say. Second is to ensure that the mindset of 2020 is not lost. Right? I think the mindset of 2020 is the best leadership mindset I have seen in a while in our people. Humble, vulnerable, problem solving, close to the ground, connected. I think all the things that we coach people, I saw that in action en masse last year. Right? But when times become better, you sort of fall back into comfort zones and say, I don't need to. But I think if you deploy the same set of skills in times of opportunity, the results could be absolutely exponential.
Right? Absolutely. In the good times, if you had the 2020 mindset.
And the third, I'll say is we do have some fantastic women leaders, but our ratios across the board need to improve. I think we do well on other parity parameters like pay equality, all those things. I think we do quite well, but just more diverse organization as we build it for the future.
No, but not in your top 20. We have a women's leadership program at Harappa, by the way. Just to plug that.
Yeah, no, I think that's our top 3 priorities in the coming year.
Great priority. We're maintaining the energy, preserving the best of the mindset of 2020, and ensuring that there's much more diverse organization, but certainly at the top, at the leadership with women being represented. Thank you so much, Rohit. We're at 5. Fascinating conversation. And as always, you've given me 2 or 3 profound, especially your elevator and stairs and the coffee and wine quotes I'm not going to forget and remember. And so I think this mindset of 2020 that you spoke about is truly a very profound, I think, realization. And I completely connect to what you're saying. In some ways, crisis reveal the best in you or the worst in you, right? And if they have revealed the best in you, hold on to that. And I think that's a really, really powerful message. We'll end, and I don't know, Harappa team, how you expect us or want us to take the selfie, but you can do your OYO. How do you guys have your OYO logo that you do, and I can do the Harappa, and that's how they can grab a screenshot of the selfie.
I think I'll just do this. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Everyone, they just take a selfie. So, Rohit.
Like this?
That's Harappa, by the way. Kind of, the logo. Yes.
And somebody will just take a screenshot?
Yeah, Harappa team, please take the screenshot. Done? I think they've taken it probably. If they haven't, too bad. Thanks so much, Rohit. And thank you everyone for joining us for Thrive Talks. And we hope to see many of you back again. Thank you to everyone. Thanks, Rohit. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Bye.